Kung Fu Panda is back with a fourth installment in the series, which in all honesty didn't feel that necessary. I mean, the trilogy felt pretty conclusive in my opinion, so 8 years later to get another movie, it just feels like we just don't need it. But yet, here we are, because studios need to milk the shit out of their IP so they can get all those cash grabs. So we get another Kung Fu Panda 8 years later, and I'm sorry to tell you guys, but this movie sucked. And look, I know that's a pretty harsh thing to say, but I'm just saying it because the other 3 movies are just so great. So the standards are set so high, and if you don't reach them, it just makes it look really bad on you. And is the movie really that awful? It's definitely not. It's still an enjoyable film. It's not as bad as, let's say, Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate, because that was atrocious. But as I mentioned before, it's not nearly as good as the first 3 movies, which I still regard as some of the best movies that DreamWorks has produced, right up there with like Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon. But in comparison to those other 3 Kung Fu Panda movies, this movie is very disappointing because it definitely does not live up to those standards. So let's talk about Kung Fu Panda 4. Listen, the first thing I want to get out the way right off the bat is the absence of the Furious 5, okay? Because look, man, at this point they just feel like part of the family, like they're just part of the gang. You can't have a Kung Fu Panda movie and not have the Furious 5. That's like saying you're gonna do a Shrek movie and you're not gonna include Donkey, Puss in Boots, and the Gingerbread Man. It's like, hey, is that even a Shrek movie? Nah, man, don't do this. It just feels like there's something missing in the movie, and their absence is absolutely noticeable. Like, I grew up with these movies, so like those characters are so integral to Poe's like journey. So, and even in the other 3 movies, like they're actually important to the story. They're not just there for the fun of it. So to just completely disregard them and then add this new character which I could care less about just feels criminal. And I understand why they did it, because this is the cheapest Kung Fu Panda movie out of the series, so it makes sense when you have budget cuts that you can't afford the likes of Angelina Jolie and Jackie Chan and Seth Rogen. I mean, they probably have high price tags, so I totally understand, but you gotta understand my perspective that it just doesn't feel the same, because it isn't. And the introduction of this new character isn't gonna do it. Like, no matter what you do, it could be the best written character of all time, I'm not gonna be as invested in this new character than those other 5 characters. There's just no way. Just think about it. There's absolutely no way. Even if it's the best character of all time, it's one movie. I mean, maybe if they make this like another trilogy and she's in all 3 movies, I would like her more, but at this moment, it's only one movie, whereas the other ones, I've been through 3 separate journeys with them, and they're literally part of my childhood, and they're like iconic in pop culture. Like, there's just no way to get around that. You're not gonna build that same atmosphere and ambiance with this one character in one movie. It's just impossible. And I see a lot of criticism online that people hate this character because it's voiced by Awkwafina. I have no idea who Awkwafina is. I have no idea about the rage about why she's voicing characters, because I don't know about that stuff, but I have seen the heat online about it. But that's not a big issue for me, because like I said, I don't know who she is, so I really don't care who the voice is. I'm just saying from a story perspective and like a time perspective, there's no way I'm gonna care about this character in one movie as much as I care about the Furious 5, okay? So yeah, moral of the story, the Furious 5 not being in the movie was a negative for the movie. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is the villain, because one of the things I give a lot of praise for in this franchise is their villains. They have some of the best animated villains ever. Like Tai Lung, for example, is my favorite animated movie villain of all time, without exaggeration. Lord Shen is also fantastic because he's so dark and insidious. I mean, he literally massacred an entire village of pandas. Like, that's pretty dark for a children's movie, like, you know what I'm saying? And even Kai was physically imposing and had his own bag of tricks that were threatening. But this movie's villain, the Chameleon, I mean, is the worst villain out of the entire franchise. She's the least intimidating visually. She's the least threatening skill-wise. I mean, she literally says in the movie that even though she can shapeshift into Tai Lung or all these other different characters, she can't fight like Tai Lung.
Just because I can look like Tai Lung doesn't mean I can fight like him.
So that just ruins the tension. Like, why would anybody be scared of her? Why would Poe be scared of her? The only reason why she's scary is at the very end when she gets the staff from Poe and opens that like magic realm, and then she can steal the kung fu from each character. Then she's scary, but up until that point, she's nothing. And not only that, but she also has the worst motivation out of any of them. They literally describe her as just a power-hungry reptilian runt. Wow. So basic, you know? Like, literally couldn't have given her a more uninteresting motivation. She just wants to rule the world. Like, wow, really? Like every other generic bad guy in a movie, I just want to conquer the world. Doesn't give us any insight into her own character or insecurities or background and past. And later on in the movie, when she does get to explain her motivation a little bit further in detail, all she says was that she wanted to pursue kung fu, but all the martial arts schools denied her and turned her away, so she went into sorcery instead and became a master in that realm. And that's it. And I'm just like, oh my god, that is such lazy writing. If you guys watch a lot of movie review content on YouTube, you know that the general consensus about exposition is that it's frowned upon because it's just a lazy way of getting the information to the audience, and it's not as impactful as actually showing the audience. For example, like Tai Lung is such a captivating character in my opinion because we see him training to become the Dragon Warrior. We see the effort that he puts into it. We see him learning from Shifu and then Oogway denying him and then him looking at Shifu like, say something, that's my dream. Like, you see it all, and seeing it impacts us and makes us invest a lot more rather than the character just telling us, hey, I have my own problems, I don't give a f what you gotta tell me. But if I see it, that's a different story. Imagine in the first Kung Fu Panda movie, instead of showing you all that background sequence with Tai Lung and Shifu, we cut that out completely and Tai Lung just comes out of nowhere and tells Po, I should have been the Dragon Warrior, that should have been me, and Oogway told me no, and that's why I'm here to fight you. You'd be like, who the f is that guy?
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that?
It just doesn't resonate the same way, understand? And that's how this movie came across. Like, why didn't we get some scenes in the movie where we see the chameleon training in Kung Fu, training for like a tryout or a tournament or a competition, and then martial arts schools denying her and not giving her the opportunity, and then her turning to sorcery and learning that and excelling in those realms? That would have been a lot more interesting than just her coming being like, yeah, I wanted to learn Kung Fu, but they didn't let me, so I went to sorcery. You got it? And that's another thing about the previous villains. Not only do they look badass, but they're also very well written. They're well constructed. Like even Shen, you can understand where his anger comes from. Like he was literally exiled by his own parents. And this villain just doesn't have that. Look, the chameleon is by far the weakest villain out of the bunch, okay? 1, she does not look cool in any regard. 2, she's very poorly written. 3, her powers suck ass. And 4, her motivations are garbage. Alright, let's move on to the marketing of this movie because, oh, they got me. Oh, they got me. Look, this isn't a secret. The trailer's main selling point was like Po was gonna fight his old nemesises like Tai Lung, Kai, Lord Shen. I mean, they literally nostalgia bait the out of you in this trailer, and everyone was super excited on the internet. It's like, oh my god, Tai Lung, one of our favorite villains, is back. And then you go see the movie and you're like, you barely see Tai Lung. You see Tai Lung in the very end. You do see him in the first scene of the movie, and then you have like a whole hour before you see him again until the very end, and he doesn't really have a very essential part in the story, if you know what I mean. Not to mention that Lord Shen and Kai barely get any screen time, okay? So Tai Lung is the only one that actually has some time in the movie, but you could just tell it was done to just bait the older audience in with nostalgia, which sucks because when you're watching the movie, I hate that feeling where you're just like, oh, they got me. Oh, goddamn, I see what you're doing here. God damn it. I fucking bought a ticket to this shit. You just feel stupid as a person, and not only that, you don't want to have that feeling going into a movie. That usually doesn't result in a good feeling afterwards. It leaves like a sour taste in your mouth, so that doesn't help with the review of the movie. But I just feel like, wow, they totally underutilized those characters. I feel like they could have had a better use in the movie. But that's just something I wanted to mention real quickly. The last thing I want to talk about in this movie is where this movie had potential, because the Kung Fu Panda movies are so great, not only because they're funny, not only because there's great animation, but because all those movies interweave like an actual lesson in the movie. Like there is a moral to the story that usually has a very positive message that everyone can learn from, such as the first movie being about the power of belief in yourself. Like there is no secret ingredient, it's just you. And even the message in the second movie that talks about it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, it's who you choose to be from now on. Like these are powerful lessons. Like I'm low-key crying in these movies, okay? And that's where I think this movie had potential, is the lesson in this movie. The message in this movie is that change is super hard and people struggle with change. People are scared of change, but change is a part of life. That right there is an amazing concept and idea to explore explore in this movie. Like, it's a great foundation for this movie, but they really don't execute it that well, because I feel like that's a struggle that a lot of people can relate to. That's a struggle that I'm going through in my own life, like growing up, becoming an adult, going into college and transitioning into the actual workforce. Like, shit is hard. Everyone can relate to that. That is a good moral that you can weave into this story, because in the story, Po has to find a successor to the Dragon Warrior, and I feel like this would have been a lot more interesting if he would have kept the Furious Five and he had to choose between the Furious Five, because we all know the Furious Five. We have a personal connection with each and every one of them, so it would have been interesting to see which one he would have picked, why he would have picked them, what qualities did he see that they should have been the Dragon Warrior, and we all know them, so it would have kept us on the edge of the seats, like, who's he gonna pick? Like, I'm invested in every single character because I grew up with them. Whereas in this movie, it's like, I wonder who he's gonna pick. Who's it gonna be? Oh, the only character in the movie that he can pick. Wow, what a surprise. Like, come on, that is weak sauce at its finest, bro. That was such a bad way to write this story, because it's like, obviously he's gonna pick that character. There's no one else. Like, at least with the Furious Five, he would have had to make a decision. It would come with a cost. Like, yes, it would be cool to see who he picked. Like, let's say he picked Tigress, but then that means the other four don't get to become Dragon Warrior, and they all low-key want to be. So that would have been a way more interesting and cool way of executing that story than the direction they chose to go in. So yeah, look, at the end of the day, this movie was hella disappointing, and it really boils down to four major points. One, the Furious Five is not in the movie, which really bothers me. Two, the villain sucks. Three, the execution of like the lesson or like the actual story aspect, terrible. And four, for a series that's so known for being funny and hilarious and having so many great one-liners, like that first movie, man, has some of the best one-line in all animated movies and some of the best funny moments as well. This movie just doesn't pack that comedy punch. It just doesn't have those funny moments that you're gonna remember. And if I'm being honest with you guys, it's a movie that just doesn't feel like a movie. Like, it's forgettable. Like, I don't think anybody's gonna be rewatching this one or talking about it in years to come. I truly believe that, which is sad, because Kung Fu Panda, especially that first one, are some of my favorite DreamWorks movies out there, period. Some of my favorite animated movies out there, and this movie just definitely did not live up to the hype. But that's my opinion. I want to know your guys' opinion down in the comments below. Leave this video a like, subscribe if you're not already. I got a bunch of more content coming out this month, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Skadoosh.